get started, but before we call the meeting to order, Chief, this is your house. You have anything you want to say?
No, just really welcome those of you that did make it down here to Edinburgh and the Rio Grande Valley, and appreciate us being able to host a meeting down here, and looking forward to getting some of this stuff done so we can get to where we get to a final report. So thank you guys for being here in Edinburgh.
Thank you, Chief. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If T. Cole will go ahead and do the roll call of members, please.
Sheriff Roy Boyd,
Here.
Chief Jaime Ayala,
Here.
Chief Bill Avera,
Here.
Paul Christ,
Here.
Chief Solomon Cook, Bob Lydia,
Present.
Chief Ronald Phillips,
Here.
Constable Derek Rose,
Here.
Arvin Riles,
Here.
Chief Derek Watson, and John Wilkerson.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Like I said, appreciate everybody's patience. Appreciate all the work that the IT folks did here. With that, we'll move on into item number 2, which is review and take action on meeting minutes from December 19, 2023 Advisory Committee meeting. Discuss and take action on any other advisory committee procedural and parliamentary matters if necessary. Everybody should have a copy of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anybody have any comments or corrections on
Did we approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting?
Did you make a motion? I'm
Second.
sorry, sir. Okay.
Bill,
All right.
Bill
We have-
Aber, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? No? Then motion carries. We'll move on to item number 3, discuss and take action on matters related to developing minimum standards with respect to the creation or continued operation of law enforcement agencies based on the function, size, and jurisdiction of the agency as established under the Texas Occupational Code 1701.163. This includes a review and discussion and action on, first is the matrix for the creation of a law enforcement agency. I know that T. Cole has been working on this. Are you able to put that up on the screen and maybe discuss some of the changes that you've made to that?
I can. Give me just a second here to connect.
No problem.
Seven, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Good afternoon, everyone. This one up here is different.
I believe believe so.
Sheriff, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we sure can.
So
Good evening. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Sorry, just want to make sure you can hear me.
No problem. Good afternoon.
Real quick, Chief Cook, does your video work?
I'm trying to get it to work. Okay, hold on. Now, yes. Okay,
Hey, thank you.
you leave it open.
the chart, change the orientation, make it simpler to print and work with. This is what we came up with. Aaron Heath and I worked on this with some of the people here, but rather than breaking down all the different agency types, we felt like most of this could be negotiated by defining areas of responsibility. This also helps us if an agency takes on responsibilities that normally lie outside an area you would expect that type of agency to have. So like we've discussed, if there's a fire marshal's office that starts working traffic on the toll road, that they might have additional requirements based off the fact that they're now working traffic enforcement, whereas you wouldn't normally think a fire marshal's office would do that. If you look at the chart here across the top, we have those areas of responsibility. Those are mainly going to be related to equipment and facilities. But for
Volume keeps breaking.
Yeah, you're breaking
Yeah, the
out.
microphone's not working very well.
Can y'all hear me okay now?
Yeah, we hear you now, TJ.
So the firearm would be required of all agencies, but then when you look at one radio communication device, it tells you based on responsibility if you would need those. So for example, an investigator with DA's office wouldn't necessarily have to be issued a radio, but he would have to have a cell phone or some other kind of communication device. So we did the breakdown of those equipment and facilities there. And then at the bottom, we have the section on the administrative requirements, which generally apply to all agencies. And then on the policy requirements over here, which again are the responsibility of all agencies. But the draft rule that I sent, everything should be captured in this chart that's in the rule. And this would be a simple way to look at it and see what's required of your agency depending on the responsibility and type of services you provide.
I think that functions a lot better than what we initially had. So,
did not feel like they were performing that function, they wouldn't have to do that.
Exactly. Some agencies aren't required to have patrol vehicles. They don't do patrol functions. They don't do those things, so they wouldn't be required to have it. They're required to have at least one vehicle for the agency, but not necessarily patrol vehicles.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
so TJ, so as part of the application process by T-Cole in order to obtain permission to form a law enforcement agency, would we have some sort of questions on there asking them what the functions of that office are going to be so that a determination can be made as to what areas of compliance they need to participate in?
Exactly. And then again, the change that same thing. We're contemplating an annual report, and if your agency has changed. So I think ISDs are a great example. When a lot of them are created, it's one person, it's the chief. He may do no patrol, he may not have a car, but as and more campuses get cars, I report the change in duties, and then they would report the change in equipment to match that change in duties.
And then this could be something that would be updated whenever they have their audit by TCOL, when it comes time to audit their other records.
Right, so I don't know if audits and inspections will be concurrent or if they'll be separate, but yes, I would contemplate that. They will pull your last year's report, how you report your responsibilities, how you report your equipment, and then they would make sure that you're in compliance and match up with that.
Okay. All right, so I guess maybe something to the effect that we would have to do something like law enforcement agencies have to do something like a survey on a regular basis in order to ensure that they were being placed into the right categories.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
I said, so what we could have is something like a regular survey that law enforcement have to do maybe on an annual basis that would ensure that their compliance was they were falling in the correct categories and complying with all the areas that pertain to the duties they're performing. Would that be how you would see that function?
And I know you and I, Sheriff, I'm sorry, I know you and I have discussed this, but to make sure the rest of the group is clear, I don't anticipate this being something that enforcement works. In other words, if an officer calls me and says, well, I left this agency, but they had to take enforcement action, like you said, that's something to be noted for the next inspection or audit to make sure that they're in compliance in that area.
Correct. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments with regards to the updated chart that we have here?
Mr. Chairman, I only have one. With regards to ISDs, we have a statute this year that came into effect that said we couldn't use tasers and chemical irritants and some other things on certain students. And so that's going to make a less than lethal weapon.
We have that in our draft policy, and I think that's something we need to discuss.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely do.
Sheriff and Chief Rivera, if I can add to that, please stop you guys from using that. It just specifies that you cannot use it on 5th grade below unless they're a danger to themselves or somebody else. And I think with the intent with the legislature on that is that all officers do have an option that's not lethal. So I think, I don't know that I would recommend pulling that out for ISDs.
Yeah, I didn't say pull it out, but some agencies choose in the school setting. And so that's the predominant less than lethal weapon now. And so there's going to have to be some other policy or local practice have determined by the school board that will.
We are having a little bit of difficulty with you cutting out.
I understand Representative Hull's bill and was there when it was debated, but that was some concerns we had then and still have some of them because there are some of those agencies that don't.
And Chief Rivera, to be clear, my goal in this is to meet the legislative intent, the requirement, but to leave as much local control as possible. So the rule requires that you have to have at least one less lethal force weapon per officer, but you get to pick what that is. So like Mr. Wilkerson was saying, if they carry OC spray and a baton and something else, and they can only use those in certain situations, that's what weapon by our definition, they'll be in compliance. It's going to be up to the agency to choose what that is.
If I can give you a good example, in my agency, the officers carry ass batons, and either they carry a taser or they carry a pepper gun. However, they are not to be used on the K-12 students because we have adults that commit crimes on property also. So an officer has to be ready to deal with a situation. So our policy is we don't use them on kids.
But you would meet the requirements twice over. They have two options, so we only
Exactly.
require one option per officer.
Yeah. And we try to give them a good range to deal with the force continuum, okay?
Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns with regards to the chart that we have?
Yes, sir, Chairman Derek Watson.
Go ahead.
Not a concern, just a comment. Major Vineyard, that is an outstanding document. I think it meets the spirit of the law. It's a really clean presentation of the intent of the legislators. I'm very supportive of us adopting that document, sir.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. I believe that he did an outstanding job of making this thing flow very easily. I think it's something that's gonna be a very useful tool. Anybody else? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much for all your hard work on this at TCOL. We really appreciate it. We will go down on our work groups. I'll start off with public benefit group. Does anybody have anything from the public benefit side? If not, the sustainable funding sources, any updates on that?
Yeah, Sheriff, I'll actually touch both of those. The document that TJ sent over, another great job by TJ on that, giving kind of an update on the rules and some of the definitions. One of the recommendations that was put in there was the sustainable funding and the public determination, or the determination that it's a public benefit. Thinking about it from a municipal standpoint, if you're going to have a new municipality that's going to create there should be consideration given on requiring the governing body to actually have a public hearing where members of that community can come in. They can see that proposed budget. They can see what that cost is going to be. And you have that requirement that has to be submitted to TCOL that shows that. So there's that aspect of it. And then I went in and made some recommendations on maybe a new definition in that rule that actually talks about what a line item budget is.
You cut out on us.
Where did I cut out, sir?
You said there's a line to say what a line item budget is. So that.
Oh, yes, sir. It's a recommendation of language that would be added to the definitions section of the administrative code that would actually define what a line item budget would be.
Excellent. I think
It'd be on page 8.
that would be something you would put into the TCOL rules, into the handbook. I believe TJ's pulling it up right now.
So can we go back just a little bit to the sustainable funding sources portion?
Yes, sir.
We kind of address this as two parts. You'll see in the draft statute that there's a few things that we put in the definitions in order to simplify it. A lot of sense. So here we describe the sustainable funding sources: funding from an agency's governing body, such as property tax, sales tax, use and franchise fees, and the issuance of traffic citations. We have the traffic code or the transportation code limitation in there that was requested. And then we explain that, because I think that was important to this group, is we show the difference between what's sustainable and what's term limited. And then in the policy itself is here where it talks about sustainable funding sources that meet or exceed the continued operating expenses outlined in a grant to purchase a building, to purchase cars, to purchase rifles. That's acceptable, but you can't cover your salaries, your fuel expenses, your continued operating expenses. he's suggesting, as I understand, that we add a definition for line item budget, which is
Yes, sir, that is the intent.
and that would be this definition here.
I apologize, but we can't read that from here, so. But that, obviously, by the red is some new language that has been placed into there.
Yes, sir, on this particular document, anything appearing in red is,
So my only two concerns with adding this definition are, one, whether or not I have people who have the expertise to check for all these and go through it. On the enforcement side, I'm always concerned. We have people who will go back and submit public information requests and then argue that this particular budget didn't have subsection G and therefore it was invalid and the agency is invalid and their establishment was based on false pretenses, and they'll make complaints, which you and I, we generally know are not valid complaints, but they still have to be investigated and documented and resolved. So when we add complexity to this, we make it more difficult for the agency, for us, and then open the door to complaint space.
That's a very,
Wanting to do that, when they initiate an agency, we can require them to provide a budget of whatever detail we want. But once they're established, if we're going to require them to keep submitting budgets annually, if we don't have this in there, then it would be difficult to compel them to do that. So I think there is a reason for doing that, particularly if we're going to monitor the ongoing operation of agencies and require annual budgets.
I think that's something we're going to have to give due consideration to, because I know we've talked about how under Senate Bill 22, many of us are going to have to submit our annual budgets every year to the state of Texas. And so the way that this is going to function is something we're going to have to take a look at so that it doesn't cause an undue burden on not only the local law enforcement agencies, but also on TCOL with regards to tracking, keeping up, and dealing with the side effects of some of the things that we're working on. So I think we're going to have to, maybe next week when we have our workshop, we may have to have a much more in-depth conversation about that and kind of basically war game what the possibilities are of the language that we ask for, so that we make sure that we don't inadvertently cause a problem that should not exist. Is there anything else on these first two statutory considerations? Hearing none, we'll move to number 3, which is the number 3 statutory considerations, which is the physical resources available to officers. Is there any update on this? I know we've already heard a little bit about it with regards to some of the restrictions of the ISTs, but does anybody have anything on that?
No, sir.
I would like to, Mr. Wilkerson gave some good feedback on the less lethal weapons, which I have here, and this has been brought up in our discussions here. So the definition that we used is a restrictive definition in that it does not include firearms. Firearms are not less lethal weapons. That doesn't mean that you can't use them and you can't have them. Obviously, a shotgun with beanbag rounds is a less lethal force weapon. It's my belief that what the legislature intended is that you have to have, every officer has to have some option between grabbing and punching somebody and shooting them. You got to give them something in the middle. And like Chief Cook was talking about, he gives his officers at least a couple options. The more, the better. But I don't want an agency to be firing wooden blocks from a shotgun as their only less lethal option. So if we're going to require a less lethal option, it cannot be a firearm. It doesn't mean you can't have one. You can certainly have less lethal shotguns and other ones, but you have to have something other than a firearm for each officer. An ASP, OC spray, taser, could be any number of things, but if it's coming out of a firearm, we know that that is almost always towards the lethal end of the less lethal. It's far more likely to have lethal results. So if we're going to require one, by the definition we used initially, it could not be a firearm.
Very
And just
valid.
to expound on that a bit more, TJ, I don't know if y'all are aware of this, the Taser 10 is actually defined as a firearm.
And I think it's going to go, you got to remember, all this is within the rule. It's within our definition. So this is what's considered a firearm in this reading, in this rule, right? I understand what you're saying, that ATF may define it because it, emits a projectile or however, but I don't believe that it's going to fall under our definition of a firearm. But I agree with the reading that our definition of less lethal force weapon would not include a shotgun with less lethal rounds. That could not be the only weapon available to an officer. They would have to have some other less lethal in order to meet our requirements. And if you want to, we could, in our firearm definition, I think we could add that tasers or what do they call them, electrical discharge, whatever, we could put that in there as not a firearm to make sure it's clear. Conducted electrical weapons.
I think that would be a good idea. I know reading through this, part of the issue that we commonly run into is we've got all these different definitions across all these different codes, and just trying to keep it simplified and what we all know firearms to be as defined under the penal code. So that was kind of my train of thought moving forward on that. But yeah, I think if it's specified that an ECW is not considered a firearm despite or notwithstanding any other provision of the statute, I think that would work.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what T. Cole doesn't want is for, some place somewhere to have the one shotgun with beanbag rounds in the closet and saying that that's the one that's available to everybody. I think TJ and his group have given some good consideration to all that. Okay, we'll move on to number 4, the physical facilities of an agency, including evidence room, dispatch area, public area. Does anybody have anything on this requirement?
Sheriff, I apologize. Can I go back to one thing?
Yes, sir, you may.
We had patrol vehicle in here. And this is another one, because the statute requires the patrol vehicles in certain situations. We described where those would be. We tried to keep it as simple as possible. A vehicle equipped with emergency lights, siren, and the means to safely detain and transport a combative detainee. I've had the question asked, does that mean everybody has to have cages? No, it certainly doesn't. A cage would meet the requirement clearly, but if you have a seatbelt and a hobble restrained and that's how you transport prisoners, as long as you can articulate that, I think that's acceptable. Mr. Wilkerson had added the suggestion of radio communication equipment. I'm fine with that. I think what most agencies, and again, remember, a lot of these are one-man agencies that might be buying a used vehicle and equipping it. A lot of them are going to argue when I'm in the car with my handy-talkie, it's got radio communication equipment in there. I think we would normally approve that. If what this group feels is that they need to have an actual radio installed in the car in addition to a handy-talkie, then we would need to explain that separately. But right now, a lot of these agencies that start up, they get an MOU with the local sheriff's office. Sometimes they even get a loaner radio from them, and they're working off their dispatch. So adding a radio also installed in the car is a whole level of expense and complication beyond what a lot of them are doing, especially when they're first initiating an agency.
If you wouldn't mind, when we meet next week, I wouldn't mind having a little bit more in-depth discussion about what y'all have seen on that end of things. So we can make a good educated decision on how we want to go with that, because I'm a firm believer in both the mobile and the handhelds, being available to those people in the streets. But there's sometimes things that I don't understand because I have not been in those situations. So maybe T. Cole can shed a little bit more light whenever we sit down for our workshop next week, if you don't mind, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else back on number 3? Mr. Wilkerson better watch out. Y'all may be putting him on the payroll here pretty soon. He's so good at going through all these things. I'll go ahead and go back to the physical facilities of the agency, including any evidence, dispatch area, or public area. Does anybody have anything on that statutory consideration? I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
Just a general comment again. I think that chart does a very good job of hitting the minimum standards for the legislation.
The one thing that you'll see we added here, it basically is consistent with the Sandra Bland Act and what everybody's supposed to have on their citations now about how to make a compliment or a complaint against a member of the agency. We deal with a lot of agencies that are part-time agencies, right? They close during the day and they refer people to the sheriff's office. So we would want it posted and visible if someone shows up at the police department, how to get help right away, how to make a non-emergency report, and then how to make that compliment or complaint. And for those agencies that close their doors and lock their doors, having that visible from outside, I think just makes sure that anybody who shows up at the police department expecting help knows how to get that help.
That's a good point. Thank you. Anything else?
That was the concern.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was the concern that some people had dealing with ISDs, is that, you know, at a certain time, you know, there's no way to contact law enforcement not knowing who, because a lot of them refer to the sheriff's department or to the city, but, you know, they should have some type of documentation or signposted saying how to go about contacting them.
Yes, sir. I bet we would all agree. Is there anything else on statutory consideration number 4? If not, we'll move on to number 5, policies of the agency, to include the list of policies that there are already requirements under TCOL rules. Does anybody have anything on the policies? No, not at this time. Then we'll move on to number 6, the administrative structure of an agency.
Sheriff, I apologize. I think we did add one policy that's not on this chart that I will update, but we were going to put a reference in there to a policy on continuing education to maintain licensure, just to make sure that all agencies have something in their policy manual that references ongoing training requirements to maintain your license. Not all officers keep up with TCOL rules, but if it's in your policy, either referring them to where to get it, or if you want to put the actual requirements in there, I think it makes that much more likely that officers will have that information and stay in compliance.
Yes, sir. All right, we'll move on to number 7, insurance. I know we had some discussion about this recently. Anybody have any updates on that one? If not, the last one, which is any standard the commission considers necessary. Does anybody have anything on this above and beyond the previous 7 statutory considerations? Okay. If not, does anybody have anything else with regards to discussion, taking action on matters related to developing minimum standards?
Sheriff, I have two items or suggestions. The first one is if you're comfortable with these general requirements, I can provide at the next meeting, I can have them draft a new application that's consistent with these requirements, and then sort of like an inspection checklist. I think that the group had mentioned it would be helpful to see what those documents would look like on the TCOL side to help guide your decision. So I can have them produce something based on this. Not to say it can't be revised, but at least gets us started that direction. And then second, I think it would be important for this group to start considering what a reasonable effective date would be. Understanding that we have several people in the application process at all times. But I understand that we want to get this in effect as soon as possible. So I think we're going to want to pick a goal date that all applications received on or after this date would be subject to the new requirements, and those submitted before would be subject to the old requirements. That way, once we take this to the commissioners and they start reviewing it as people are asking for applications, we can let them know when that deadline is, and they can make they can start their effort knowing which group they're going to fall into.
So let me ask you a question with regards to that. So no under legislation unless it specifically states otherwise, then it goes into effect 90 days after the legislation is passed. So do the rules for T-Cole such as this, do those also have certain regulations or rules that are similar in nature, or is it just based off of whenever the commission sets the rule in place?
I can answer that question. So it depends. There is the option for saying a future date that the rule will become effective, or if there's no future date set, then it's whenever it gets published by the Secretary of State's website.
Okay.
And so that's usually 20, I think it's 20 days after submission of the adopted rule.
Okay. And then I guess
Chair,
what we'll probably need to do is, as part of this process, is have a discussion with you there at T-Cole and, you know, discuss what steps you will have to take in order to be able to enforce or take action upon these things so that we can look at, and I know I've said this before, but the burden that it places on the minimum staffing that you have with regards to implementation of these things. So those are some things we're going to have to look at. Well, is there somebody else that had something to say? I apologize if I cut you off. Okay, if not, does anybody else have anything from item number 3 there from our agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 4, which is discussion, take action on future advisory committee meeting dates and locations, including video conferencing. We have a posted date for next Tuesday. I believe it's the 16th, and that one will be at 10 a.m. instead of 1 a.m. so that it will be a workshop at the T-Cole offices so that we can go through and take a look at some of these things. And I was going to ask T-Cole if they could print out some of these things that they have that we've discussed, but TJ's already ahead of us on that. So I know we have that meeting on the 16th. We had on our schedule for a meeting in the DFW area for the 23rd, which of course would have to be posted by this Friday. So I could swear somebody sent out an address for that, but I'll have to go back and look in my email. Is there
Yes, I
anybody
did,
that knows?
Sheriff.
Okay. All right.
And I also copied TJ on it.
Okay. And so we'll get that scheduled for the 23rd then. But next Tuesday, the 16th, like I said, we'll be at T-Cole, and it will be at 10 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock, because that meeting may run considerably longer as we go through and iron out some of these things as part of our workshop. Does anybody have any questions or comments with regards to that? I know that we were looking at February 6th, maybe in Humble. So if we don't have an address in Humble, then if you still wish to host one there, then just let us know the address so that we can make sure that we get it posted in a timely manner.
I'll get that to you today. Sorry I didn't do it sooner.
No, that's all right. Like I said, just send it to Sarah or TJ as well, please. So,
Okay.
because I'm on the run and I feel for them because they have to chase me down somewhat sometimes. Or wait for me to get back at my desk. All right.
Sheriff,
Hearing,
real quick.
go ahead.
This is Aaron Heath. So February 6th might be too late to have a meeting.
Okay.
We were looking at completing all of the advisory committee meetings by the last week of January. So the 29th, 30th, 31st, maybe even the 1st and 2nd of February. We have to submit, we have to prepare all the stuff for the commission, and that will require us to have that all submitted by February 8th for us. And so the 6th might be too late for us to work on it any further.
Okay, so,
And so if you're looking to have another meeting after the 23rd, maybe that last week of January would be a better time.
all right, to be quite frank with you, I think what we'll have to do is we'll have to do that one at T-Cole so we can all come together and wrap that up there at their office.
Okay.
We'll have to figure it out. So we'll have to get back, look at our calendars, and we'll get that to you promptly. I'll send something out with some options after I visit with T. Cole to see when things are available there. Will that work for you? Y'all there in Austin?
Yes, that will. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then we'll go ahead and move to item number 5, which is receive public comment on any topic without action. Do you have anything, Commander? We have a commander from Brooks County Sheriff's Office showed up. We appreciate it, sir. All right. If not, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So made.
I'll second it.
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I bet nobody's against it. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate it. We do appreciate you for hosting us, Chief, and for the IT folks working through all the problems we have. Thank you for your patience on the other end with us. Thank you very much. God bless you. Y'all have a safe day, okay?
Thank you. Y'all be safe.
Be safe.